befriend.
Have you not?
And here we
And here we go indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Ambassador Wing and another installment in the 90s Retro Rewind series. I am, of course, your host, the Ambassador. And yes, I know I'm late. Yes, I know I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm late, guys. It's been a very, very taxing, very trying, very long weekend here at the Ambassadorial Homestead. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna sugarcoat. It's been a trip and a half. But I'm here. So at least that's something. Um, I do want to apologize to you all for delay for rescheduling the stream from last night to tonight, and then switching the time, and then of course being late. But as the old saying goes, life happens, and sometimes life just plain stinks. And sometimes you have a cat that doesn't know when to leave things alone, like me. Don't get me wrong, I love our cats. They are little furry children, and we love them. But sometimes they can be a pain in the neck. But I don't think you all are here tonight to hear me to talk about our cats. Tonight we're here to discuss another personal favorite of yours truly, Scream 2. Now, most of you know this, as I put this in the description, this is by far one of my favorite horror movie sequels. What Scream, the original Scream, did, this took and elevated and somewhat perfected. And I have long been a fan of the Scream series. Well, at least the first three, the original trilogy of Scream, if you prefer. Did I just make a Star Wars reference? Yes, I did. And am I okay with that? Yeah, I am. I'm okay with that. And I'm talking to myself. And that's okay. But yes, am I a fan of the Scream franchise? Yes, at least the first three, maybe four movies. The Scream 4 was okay. It wasn't as good as the original three, but it was okay. But this one, Scream 2, I absolutely love this movie. This is like Scream, the college years, because this is Sydney and Dewey and Randy and all of their friends. Well, at least the ones that survived the first movie. Which, if you remember Scream 1, Sydney and Randy and Dewey and Gail are the only ones that survived from the original batch of killings in crap, I forget the name of the town. Woodsboro. But this movie has gotten in the Scream universe, it has gotten a lot more meta. Because not only is there now has there been a book about the killings in Woodsboro by Miss Gail Weathers, played by Courtney Cox. But there is also now a movie memorializing the events in Woodsboro, and it's in. They, of course, got Tori Spelling to play Sydney in the movie, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. This was, by all metrics, a very successful and a very well done sequel. Scream 1 was such a massive hit in the 90s that they're like, we've got to do another one. And of course, Wes Craven, one of the granddaddies of horror movies, particularly slasher movies, brought us this little gem, Scream 2. Now, why do I love this movie as much as I do? Well, it's pretty simple. It's a slasher movie at college, but it also has a cameo appearance by, well, a personal celebrity crush of yours truly. That, of course, being Miss SMG, Sarah Michelle Gellar. We also know and love as the Slayer, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. For those of you that checked out the review for Buffy the Vampire Slayer I did this past weekend, there was kind of a rhyme and reason why I did these two movies, because one is actually, well, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which ended up bringing us the series that we love and its spinoff, Angel, which we also love, but also the fact that Sarah Michelle Gellar has a cameo in this movie. I can tell you this much right now: if that was actually Buffy, Ghostface would not have standed a ghost of a chance. It would have been Ghostface leaping off of or being thrown off of the balcony at the sorority house. Not Casey. Not Casey Cooper. But again, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, because this movie actually has a really cool cold open. And it's the premiere for the slasher movie based on the events of the Woodsboro killings by Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. And it's called Stab. You got Scream, and then you got Stab. I don't know how I feel about that. Do I think that's a good thing? Yeah, I think that's a good. I think those are good. That's a good title for a slasher movie, to be perfectly honest. But it also has a pair of cameos at the beginning. You have Jada Pinkett before she was Miss Jada Pinkett Smith. And I should have pulled this up, but I didn't, and I do most sincerely apologize. But I'm going to pull up the IMDb for Scream 2 real quick. Scream 2 IMDb. Thank you. 1997, the year I graduated from high school. And man, was it a good movie. Okay, here. Omar Epps. Yep. Omar Epps plays Phil. And of course, you've got. I don't care about Snow White. I'm not going to go see your crappy movie this weekend. I'm going to watch a good movie. Kind of like Maureen and Phil were and everything when they went to go see Stab. Of course, Phil was only interested if it was a Sandra Bullock movie. Us men, we are so damn simple. We really, really are. And that's okay. Because simplicity is the spice of life. So, but this is not good. It's just an interesting discussion. But what Scream, the first movie, did so well was it poked fun at the slasher movie genre, and it did so with a director at the helm that was synonymous with that genre, of course, Wes Craven. And Wes pulled no punches with this movie. He really didn't, and he went for the gusto with the opening kills, because you've got a double murder at the multiplex, or at least, well, the singleplex. I think it was a single screen theater. Maybe it was a double screen. Who knows? But it reminded me of a 1950s or 1960s horror movie premiere, and everything from back in those decades, because you had the giant ghost face with the giant arm, with the giant knife moving up and down outside above the marquee, and then everybody gets handed a ghost face costume that actually glows in the dark. I'm not gonna lie, that was actually really cool because it was the mask and the knife that glowed in the dark. And I think Wes Craven did this on purpose because no more than likely he probably grew up watching the old slasher horror movies, the creature features from the 1950s and 60s. And this was a nice homage to those old movies and everything that we all know and love. At least if you're a Gen X or if you're a Gen Z that's got enough culture. Let's just put it that way. And no, that's not a dig at any Gen Zs, Generation Z, or Generation Alpha. Well, Generation Alpha, you're probably not even old enough to remember the original Scream. You weren't even alive yet. So, and that's okay. Not your fault. But the thing I enjoy, one second, folks. Thank goodness our cat's afraid of water. But one of the things I really enjoyed about this movie was the kills were so creative and so bloody and so intense. And that's what makes this movie fun. And the fact that you've got Randy and Dewey, who are almost like the experts of how to survive a scary movie. Of course, unfortunately, we lose Randy in this movie. R.I.P. Randy, aka Jamie Kennedy. Of course, we do get a cameo from Beyond the Grave by Jamie Kennedy and his on-screen sister. Not his actual sister, but you get my point. But yeah, unfortunately, Randy dies in this movie, and that made me very sad when Mrs. Loomis. Spoilers, just spoilers, everybody. If you have not ever seen Scream 2, it's Billy's mother and Mickey, the freaky Tarantino-esque film student. Although I'm a fan of Tarantino, so I don't necessarily know how I feel about that. But at the same time, do I think Tarantino could do a slasher movie? Yeah, I do. But did he ever? No, and that's okay. Because Tarantino's given us a whole lot of other movies, which you can go check out the reviews for on this channel over on the Tarantino podcast playlist. But you've got Timothy Olyphant in one of his early starring roles or anything, and I have to admit, I liked Timothy Olyphant in this movie. You don't know exactly what. At Xavier Pierce. Xavier, good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you stopping by. Hope you're doing well. Sorry, I saw your comment late and everything. So, but Xavier, good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you stopping in. So, but I have to admit, I liked Timothy Olyphant in this movie. He had a good, relatively well developed character for his everything, and you didn't know exactly if he was the killer, if he was in cahoots with the killer, if he was an innocent bystander, whatever the case may be. But that's what I like about Timothy Olyphant as an actor. He has range as an actor. He doesn't just do, and that's not obviously a bad thing, because in a slasher movie, you don't want your characters to be too predictable, because if your characters get too predictable, it gets boring. Don't want that. But also, Of course, we got Neff Campbell returning as Sidney Prescott. We got David Arquette returning as Dewey Riley. Um, got, as I mentioned, Jamie Kennedy. You got Gail. You got Courtney Cox returning as Gail Weathers, and of course, it's always a staple. There's always a punch or a slap or something between Sydney and Gail. But there's one addition to the cast that I really enjoyed, and that was Liv Schreiber as Cotton Weary. And of course, we got Laurie Metcalf as well. We got her as the Debbie Salt, a reporter, but we find out later she's not even really Debbie Salt. She's Mrs. Loomis, Billy's mama. That's right. Billy did have a mother, and man, was she as loony as her son. Of course, as she said, my motivation isn't as 90s as Mickey's. Mine is just good old fashioned revenge. And she actually become relevant in Scream 3, which I might do a discussion or a watch along for that and everything. Because I want to eventually do all three of the original Scream movies. But and I and everything. One other actor who has a cameo appearance, one scene, and then he's gone, and that's David Warner. He plays Sydney, theater professor. And interestingly enough, the theater group that or the theater class that Sydney is a part of is doing a production of Cassandra. Now, little bit of a segue or a little bit of a rabbit trail for you all. Who exactly is Cassandra? Well, Cassandra is a character from Greek mythology. She was a prophetess who actually lived in Troy. And she actually warned the Trojans, hey, guys, the Greeks are coming. They're going to sack us. They're going to destroy us. So maybe we should make good with them, or maybe we should run. But they didn't listen. And of course, Sydney plays Cassandra. And you've got members of the other fraternities and the frats and so on that are in the production along with her. But of course, there's one scene in particular where Sydney gets spooked, which is understandable considering everybody's wearing masks, everybody's in these heavy brown robes, and she starts seeing somebody wearing the ghost face mask and lurking amongst the rest of the chorus. And it's a very spooky scene. It's a very, very creepy, suspenseful scene because we don't know if we're actually seeing the same thing Sydney's seeing, or if she's in fact seeing things, which I enjoyed. I'm not gonna lie. But the actor that I mentioned before, David Warner, this guy is an alum of Star Trek, particularly the Star Trek Next Generation, the original series movies. In Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, he played a Federation ambassador. And then in Star Trek VI, the Final Frontier, or not Final Frontier, the Klingon council, Gorka. And he's been in a number of other things. If you were a fan of old school sci-fi, he was in the original Tron movie where he played Edward Dillinger, aka Sark, his internet counterpart. He was actually in a episode of Babylon 5, I think in one of the earlier seasons. Come here. Say hi, Annie. Hi, Annie. Annie girl. Say hi to everybody out there. Okay. All right. Go on, baby. That's one of the ambassadorial cats. That's my cat. Madam Ambassador has her cat. I have mine, but we share. But anyway, long story short, David Warner plays Sydney's acting teacher, and he's trying to gently but firmly keep her in the production and say, hey, look, you've got issues you're dealing with. I understand that. He's like, I'm not insensitive to that point, but he's like, use that as motivation for the part you're playing. He's like, Cassandra is one of the great tragic figures of mythology. She saw it all. She knew it was coming. The wars, the destruction, the madness. But she just still did her duty. She still tried to warn Troy. And I have to admit, the scene where Sydney is reciting part of Cassandra's dialogue from the play, she nails it. Of course, Neve Campbell is actually a very talented actress. Very lovely, yes, I'll admit, but also very talented. At least I think she is. If let me know what you think down below and everything, if you agree with me or not. But one of the other aspects of this movie that I really enjoyed is the hunt, the chase, and everything when they're trying to figure out who the killer is, and you've got a really good scene between Dewey and Randy when they're sitting in an ice cream shop and everything there on campus, and they're watching an interview between Tori Spelling and an interviewer, and they're talking about the in-universe movie Stab, and they actually have a clip of Tori Spelling and a young and somewhat unknown Luke, yeah, Luke Wilson, who's playing Billy. And Randy, the clip closes, and they take their attention away from the TV, and Randy's like, I'll wait for home video. Just like we do nowadays. If we don't think a movie's good, but we are still kind of interested, yeah, just wait for home video. I'll get it cheap or all. Perhaps sail the high seas, wherever the case may be. But they're going through the what to expect in a sequel for a horror franchise, and the body count's always bigger, the kills are always more elaborate, the killer may not always be who you suspect, and in this case, it's actually true because we don't expect a double. But okay, I will say this: am I necessarily surprised that it was a double killer, like it was in the first movie? No, but the other aspect that I liked was the fact that Mickey's motivations was he wanted to get to the trial. He wanted to go to trial and really make a name for himself. And Billy's mother is like, "Screw the trial. I just want them dead." But of course, you've got the added dimension of Cotton Weary, and I haven't really talked about Liv Schreiber's performance in this enough. Liv Schreiber is an actor that has come to grow on me quite considerably and everything. I actually enjoyed his portrayal of Victor Creed in X-Men Origins Wolverine as a different version of Sabretooth and everything. Obviously, this wasn't Taylor Maine, but I did enjoy Liev Schreiber. He's actually had a fairly substantial career and everything as an actor. Obviously, he did Scream 2. He had his cameo in Scream 1. He had his cameo or his cold open with Scream 3, and then of course, well, Cotton got killed. He did a political thriller alongside Morgan Freeman and Ben Affleck, and everything called The Sum of All Fears, which is a continuation of the Jack Ryan film franchise. It was actually the last, if I remember correctly, the last Jack Ryan film that they did, because there was three others before this. There was, of course, Hunt for Red October with Alec Baldwin, which I've discussed here. Clear and Present Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger. The other two were done with Harrison Ford, and then of course he had Ben Affleck as Jack Ryan in Sum of All Fears. And Liv Schreiber plays field agent or a field operative for the CIA who does kind of their dirty work. But in Scream 2, he reprises his role as Cotton Weary, and you're not exactly sure whose side Cotton is necessarily on. You don't know if he's going to be resentful of Sydney because she did accuse him of killing her mother, or if he's going to be kind of more vengeful in a way, which would be somewhat justified. I will be the first to say. But what we get is a Cotton who's like, I'm willing to live and let live. I'm willing to forgive if you are, but I want something too. Because he's kind of using this situation with a renewed series of killings and everything there at the college, or well, the university that Sydney and her friends are at, to get an interview one on one with Sydney, and Sydney doesn't want any part of it. And no, baby. But the dynamic with Cotton is interesting because, as I mentioned, you don't know whose side he's on. We don't know if he actually is a reformed man or if he was ever actually. Well, we find out, in fact, that he was innocent the whole time because it was, in fact, obviously Stumacher and Billy Loomis that killed Sydney's mother, Maureen. And Cotton pops up, clear out of the blue, kind of Gale and Cotton ambush Sydney and her friends, and Sydney goes to swing at Gale, and she's like, "Don't you dare! Don't you dare try and hit me again!" But then later on and everything, a few minutes later, sure enough, better swing. And something else we find out is that in between the movies, Dewey and Gale were actually in a relationship. Those of you who might know, and sadly this is no longer the case, but there was a time that David Arquette and Courtney Cox were actually married in real life. Now, sadly, that's been a number of years, but they have since divorced. Whatever the reasons are is between them. But I like the evolution of their character in that aspect, with the two of them, being on the outs now. Everything, the two characters, Gale and Dewey, but they do rekindle their relationship while they're trying to figure out who's doing all the killings and who's trying to go after Sydney. And there is one scene in particular where Dewey completely dresses down Gale, and that rant is, "You are a mediocre writer with a cold storage shed where your heart should be." And I had to chuckle and everything when I've always gotten a real from particular burn, because in a lot of ways Dewey's right. Dewey is a very genuine, a very warm, very caring individual, and Gale is, let's just be honest here, in terms of the in-universe character, she's like a D-list celebrity. She's like a D-list journalist. Even TMZ probably wouldn't hire her ass. She's that low class and everything, in probably from their perspective. But during the course of this movie, they go from being very adversarial to one another to like, okay, we need to work together. We know we work well together, so let's figure out who's killing all these kids and who's trying to get Sydney. And there is a scene in there, there's a chase and everything between Gale and Dewey and one of the killers. And I think we don't know for sure who it is. We don't know if it's anything. Well, later on, as I've mentioned, we discovered that it's Mickey, played by Timothy Oliphant, and Billy's mother, played by Laurie Metcalf. That name might sound familiar to you all because she played Roseanne Barr, or Roseanne Arnold's sister on the series Roseanne, which she reprised her role on The Connors, but she also played Sheldon's older mother on Big Bang Theory. Everything you might recognize them. You might recognize her from that. Thing I found interesting, and for those of you that might not know this, the actress who played Sheldon's mother when she was younger in the series Young Sheldon is actually, if I remember correctly, a relation of Laurie Metcalf. I think she's a relative or perhaps even her daughter. And they thought it was perfect casting to have a younger relation of Laurie Metcalf play, obviously, um, Sheldon's mother or anything in the series Young Sheldon. But during the course of the chase between the killer and Gale and Dewey and Gale get separated in a soundproof recording studio. And there's one very brutal scene where the killer is just absolutely ripping and tearing and slicing at Dewey and everything, who's had some everything limitations from the first batch of stabbings that he suffered in the first Scream movie. And he's got a limp and he's got an arm that's somewhat paralyzed. And we see him get very brutally and viciously attacked by the killer, and we assume, well, this is the end of Dewey. But at the end of the movie, we see him on a stretcher being brought out, all the scar tissue in his back. That took the brunt of the damage, and in fact, Dewey survived. And of course, Gale goes off with him to be with him once again. I always liked the dynamic between Gale and Dewey, even in the first movie, where it's a little bit more flirtatious and so on. But at the same time, you can tell there's chemistry there, and that the two of them, at least from Dewey's end of things, he really does care about Gale. It isn't just a physical attraction, but there's something emotional there between the two of them, and that's something that I really appreciate. But the other thing that I like is the character dynamic between Dewey and Sydney. Now, I've not really talked about Sydney a whole lot, and I guess this is as good a point of it as any to do so. Neve Campbell coming back to portray Sydney this time, like I've mentioned, while Sydney's at university. She's actually in a stable relationship. And I think she's taken a chance, and she's actually dating a guy. Darn it, I can't remember. Well, that's why we have IMDb. I remember the where are you? The actor's name is Jerry O'Connell. Where are you? Oh, for Pete's sakes, where are you? Well, okay, this is going to drive me nuts. Jerry O'Connell plays Derek, Sydney's boyfriend. Man, it took me forever to find him. Oh, and a couple little one little fun fact: Joshua Jackson actually has a cameo in this as well. For those of you who might be familiar with him, he was on the show One Tree Hill on the old WB when that was still a thing. And let's see. Oh, and I forgot another character that was introduced in this, and that was Joel, played by Dwayne Martin. Joel is the cameraman that gets assigned to Gale, and he's like, I've done a lot of local stuff, but he's like, I'm not sure if I'm necessarily cut out for this. And she's like, no, you'll do fine. Just don't worry about it. I point, you shoot, not a problem whatsoever. And he's like, okay, fine. And throughout the course of the movie, he starts reading the book that Gale wrote about the events in Woodsboro. And let's just see that Joel got his eyes opened big time, and he's like, I think I'm gonna leave. And she's like, you can't leave. And he's like, yes, I can. He's like, I'm gonna leave, and I'm not coming back until y'all start talking about something a little more Saved by the Bellish. I cannot lie. The fact that he turned the title of a show into a verb, actually kind of cool. It's almost like, y'all better start talking something a little more Terminator-esque, or I'm out of here. But I have to. Joel's character, obviously he survives and everything, but he comes back. He's like, okay, you're Gale Weathers at Windsor College, and she is like, okay, I guess we're doing this now, and she starts recounting everything that happened. But coming back to Sydney. Sydney has become a lot more smart, has become a lot more worldly, has become a lot more cautious about the people that she has around her. But she's not closed everybody off. And that's something that I like. Because we've seen in the past with the horror movie franchise, with the people that survived the previous installment, they can become somewhat callous, somewhat introverted, and just not very sociable. Now, I'm not saying that Sydney is a social butterfly. It's just the big girl on campus. No, she's not. She doesn't even want to pledge to one of the local sororities or anything there at the college. And you meet these two sorority sisters, and one is played by Rebecca Everhart, I believe is her name. Hang on. Let's see. I know it's on here. Just gotta find it. Rebecca Gayhart. I was close. Oh, I did not realize that. Well, apparently, also Portia de Rossi plays one of the other sorority sister. And for those who might be unaware, Portia de Rossi is Ellen DeGeneres' partner. So, interesting. I did not realize that was her. But anyway, you've got Rebecca Gayhart and you've got Portia de Rossi playing the sorority sisters that are trying to get Sydney to join because, well, it's all about notoriety for this sorority. And the fact that she's dating Derek, who is a member of the fraternity that is connected to the sorority, it would be even better for all of them because that would be a whole lot of notoriety. And they're talking about well, the more physical aspects of sorority and fraternity life. Let's put it that way. And there's a conversation about the styles of blowjobs that the sorority sisters give. And, well, just sex in general. And Sydney's like, yeah, no, I don't want to join you. I don't even really like you. And I wish you would just Go away. But of course, Hallie, Sydney's roommate and everything, is like, oh, come on, it's free. It's free booze. It's free food. Get to know the sisters. It's not that big of a deal. And Sydney's like, okay, fine, I'll go, but I'm not promising anything. And that whole scene, up until when the killer calls and you have the return of the voice, that voice, that very iconic voice. Hello, Sydney. What's your favorite scary movie? I can't do it as well as the actor who actually did do the voice, but you get the idea. Where's my water? I'm thirsty. But Sydney, during the course of this movie, she starts closing herself off because one, Derek gets injured by the killer when she challenges the killer to actually come out and face her face to face, and he's like, "My pleasure." And she screams for Derek and everything, and she's running, trying to get away from the killer, and it gets tense. Derek gets hurt, and then they're at the emergency room, and you see Mickey sitting next to Sydney there in the waiting room, and he's like, "What the hell is Derek thinking? You don't do this sort of thing anymore. We don't do this sort of thing anymore. You don't try to be the hero. You just try to survive. You don't try to go John McClane in these sorts of situations. You just try to get out and save your ass." Which Mickey, in a way, is not wrong, but at the same time, it's psychological head games that Mickey is playing on Sydney because he knows that she is susceptible to such things because of her past with her now very deceased psychotic boyfriend, Billy. And I will be the first to admit I like a good subversion of expectations, particularly in a horror slasher film. Now, a little bit of a segue, well, not segue, that's not the right word, but a little bit of a clarification and an explanation. The Scream series falls into the horror genre of the slasher film, but it falls into a subgenre of the slasher film. In this particular case, the killer is not by any means supernatural or anything to that respect. The killer is very, very human. And whereas you've got characters like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, the Texas Chainsaw Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and so on, the killers here in the Scream franchise are always mortal. And I think that gives the franchise a added level of suspense because they always have to up. I think it's a credit to the writers and the creatives and everything creating these stories. Like, okay, how can we make this compelling? How can we make it interesting? How can we make the audience connect with it? And through the first three movies, at least, well, as I said earlier, the original trilogy of Scream before it became, I don't know what we're up to, Scream 7, Scream 6, something like that. They always had to come up with a creative way to bring everybody back together, at least the survivors from the previous installment, or go in a different direction entirely. And what we have with the first three Scream movies is very much a connected story. Because, of course, the first movie, we get Billy and Stu. Then the second movie, we get Billy's mother and Mickey. And then the third movie, we go in a completely different direction, and we actually get Sydney's half brother. And like I mentioned before, I will probably do a more in-depth discussion on Scream 3 at some point or anything. But what I like about Scream 2 is it's its own independent story. You don't necessarily have to have watched the original Scream to know what's going on here, but it does help considerably. But if you don't go past Scream 2, you've got a nice closeout and everything if you don't decide to go any further with the franchise. And that's something that doesn't happen very often in the horror movie franchise, particularly the slasher film genre. And the other thing that I appreciate about this movie is even if you've watched it 5 or 10 different times, even though you know who the killers are, the journey, the characters, the story, the chases, the killings themselves are always so creative and intense, and the characters are extremely relatable, particularly with the main 3 or 4, that being, of course, Randy and Sydney and Gail and Dewey. Now, one of the thing I want to comment that that's in particular to Randy's death. They really build up the tension with this because Randy's actually on the phone with the killer, and um, Gail and Dewey and Randy are trying to track down the killer. And there is a line between Randy and the killer, and he asks, "Well, what's your favorite scary movie?" And Randy's like, "Showgirls, absolutely terrifying." And I could not help but chuckle and everything at that, because for those of you that might not know this, one of the stars of Saved by the Bell, which is referenced earlier on in the movie, uh, Elizabeth Berkley, decided after Saved by the Bell was over, she was going to do something a little more mature. Let's put it that way. And we were given the movie Showgirls, starring her and Kyle MacLachlan and Gina Gershon and so on. And before you ask, Ambassador, have you ever seen Showgirls all the way through? No, I have not. I've only ever seen clips of it because I never, even as a teenager, I had no interest in seeing it because it just did not seem appealing to me. And you might ask yourself, well, Ambassador, are you actually straight? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm married. I like women. But the movie just did not sound me. And, well, as Randy said, absolutely terrifying. And from what I understand, yeah, Showgirls is terrifying in more ways than one. Poorly written, poorly acted, poorly directed, it's just poor. It was the no, no, I'm not going to go there because those movies are awful in an entirely different way than Showgirls is. But the fact that you have characters like Dewey and Gail and okay, back to Randy. Randy's death is very gut wrenching because we came to like Randy. We appreciated him. We considered him kind of our goofy older brother or younger brother or just a goofy brother that we respected because he was such a cinephile. Well, and for those of you, no, a cinephile is nothing dirty. It's a person who is a fan or a lover of movies. Cine, being cinema-phile means lover of or passionate fan of. So, but yeah, it was sad to see Randy get so brutally attacked and everything. And even though he has like I mentioned before, he had a cameo from Beyond the Grave, even though Jamie Kennedy is completely alive, still alive and kicking even now. But Randy Meeks, who Jamie Kennedy played, gets killed. And I remember going to see this in theaters and everything when it originally came out. And a lot of the people, including myself, were like, "Not Randy! How could you kill Randy? You a-hole!" And then we come to find out and everything during the final confrontation, that it was in fact Billy's mother who killed Randy, and we're like, "Oh, bitch, you're gonna die. And we're gonna clap when you die." And getting to the finale, the last big confrontation face to face between um, Sydney and Gail and Cotton and Mickey and Billy's mother. That thing's intense, particularly when you add in because you add in the fact that Cotton's kind of on the fence about who side he's on. But when Sydney's everything when Cotton says, "I bet you the Diane Sawyer interview sounded pretty good right now because well, Billy's mother's got a knife to or a gun to Sydney's head," and Sydney looks him in the eye and says, "Consider it done." And he just Cotton just unloads on Billy's mother. And then a few minutes later, after they make sure she's dead, Mickey pops back up and Gail and Sydney unload on him. And just as a little extra added bonus, before they leave the stage, Sydney looks at the corpse of Billy's mother and she puts one right here. She's like, just to be sure. Couldn't hurt because that's what she ended up doing to Billy at the end of the first Scream. So you can pretty much say that except for maybe Billy's dad, she wiped out the entire Loomis family, and nothing of value was really lost because the mother and the son were both cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But I want to just a few final thoughts before I wrap up for the evening. If you have never seen Scream 2, I certainly hope that my discussion here tonight has not ruined the idea of doing so. Because even though I have discussed some spoilers throughout the course of this rewind tonight, if you've ever considered watching the original 3 Scream movies, go do it because they are fun, they are entertaining, they'll give you a good scream every once in a while, which is the whole point of a good slasher movie. And they're not overly complicated because not all movies in cinema have to be big concept movies. Sometimes they just need to be good, entertaining movies. And that's what the Scream franchise is. It gives you exactly what you expect. It does so in a way that's entertaining, that is at times humorous, and is by no means dull. Because the Scream movies, particularly the first 3, are anything but dull. Now, you all might ask one final question. Ambassador, will you ever give any of the other Scream movies a chance past Scream 4? If the price is right and I can find a box set of all the Scream movies, or at least the ones that I don't have, I'd consider it. Yeah. Because I enjoy this franchise very much so. Because I will always, no matter how old I am, I'm in my mid 40s now, and I still love slasher movies. I still love horror movies because you have good performances. You have at times very excellent. You have excellent writing. You have excellent direction, and the slasher movie genre is one of those that, from the comfort of your favorite chair or your bedside or wherever the case may be, gives you the opportunity to kick back and watch a good old fashioned cat and mouse chase between some of your favorite characters and the big bad. And you don't have to worry about anything happening except maybe your blood pressure jumping a few times, or having a good scream or a good yell or a good shock at one point or another. So, but if I was going to score Scream 2, I would give it a good 7 I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Not because I think there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but because I don't consider the Scream movies to be, by any means, perfect movies or like superly outstanding movies. They are very entertaining, yes, absolutely. But there are far better movies out there. But the Scream movies are by no means bad. They're entertaining, and that's what they're meant to be. So, but with all that said, folks, I hope you all enjoyed this discussion tonight. As always, make sure you smash that like button, share this rewind out with all your friends who are fans of the slasher movie genre, particularly the Scream franchise. I will be back later this month and everything, with Mam Ambassador or just myself and everything, as we discuss a few films from our childhoods and our teen years, and everything that it made an impression upon us. That was, of course, being some of the animated features from Disney, and some of their, well, not specifically, let me put it this way, live action interpretations of the old Grimm's fairy tales. For instance, Snow White and the Huntsman, and Cinderella, and so on. Because I'm not gonna go see Snow White. No, thank you. Not happening. But again, I hope y'all have a good night or afternoon or day wherever you're at. As I always like to say when I close, be ambassadorial. Be yourself. Be honest. Never take yourself too seriously. If you do all those things, you always have a place here at the ambassadorial wing. Y'all have a good night.
Let's be friends.
Have you not?